Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah Butler from Faith Trust Institute. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Called to Serve. I'll introduce our presenter in just a moment, but first I want to go over a couple of technical details. First of all, you should be able to hear me as well as see the technical information slide coming up on your screen right now. If you're having problems with the sound, please check to make sure that your speakers or headset are plugged in and that your volume is turned up. If you're having other technical problems, I recommend that you exit the webinar, return to the link in your email, and then reconnect again. That should take care of the problem. All audience members are muted throughout the presentation, so if you have questions or comments, you can send them to me at any time using the question feature on the right side of your screen. If you can't see the question feature, there should be a small orange arrow, and if you click on that, that will open up more feature options for you. We'd love to hear from you, so please submit your question to me anytime during the presentation, and then I will hold on to them until the last 15 minutes or so we can get to as many questions as possible. The slides you see on your screen today will be sent to you as a PDF later this afternoon, so you will have them as a resource. And lastly, we're recording this webinar to make it available on our website for those who aren't able to attend the live presentation. So we are delighted to have Bettie Williams-Watson with us today. She is the founder and executive director of Multi-Communities MIC, which is a nonprofit organization. She's worked on the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault for decades as an activist and advocate for victims. If you've ever seen Faith Trust Institute's video, Broken Vows, then you've seen Bettie. In that video, she spoke eloquently about the failure of her faith community to support her when she raised the reality of domestic violence. We're delighted she's here with us today. And just a reminder, everyone, if you have questions, please submit them anytime. And Bettie, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I am. Hello, my name is Bettie Williams-Watson, and today we're going to talk about my calling to break shame and silence in predominantly African-American faith communities. We will only be able to cover a few things in the short time that we have, but I want to say that there are many similarities in other communities of faith that also exist. Our talk will mainly focus on women survivors of violence, but we also recognize that men can also be victims as well, although not in as great a percentage as women. Children are also a very important part of the equation in every faith community and are tremendously impacted as well when violence occurs. Over 30 years ago, I escaped an abusive marriage with my 2 children and went to a shelter after returning to my husband for a total of 7 times. He was a Church of Christ minister. During the last violent episode, my children and I almost lost our lives. The realization came very quickly then that no matter how long I stayed and tried to be the good Christian wife who just kept on suffering and forgiving, I needed to leave. I feared more for the safety of my children than myself, and I knew they had no power to save themselves. My 2 daughters were 4 years and 5 weeks old at the time we left. At the time I was in an abusive marriage, I didn't consider myself to be a battered wife, even though he had held a butcher knife to my throat, threatened to kill me frequently, and had set on me while I was pregnant. I did not identify with any language that labeled me as being an abused wife. I learned much later, however, that I was a victim of physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and sexual abuse. In addition, even after I left, my children and I were still in danger. He continued to stalk her for 7 years in spite of having a protection order against him. 1 year later, after taking time for my own and my children's healing process, I felt ready to move forward. The Lord laid it on my heart what I needed to do. Consumed by strong passion, drive, purpose, and heart, I knew I had to do all I could to help other women and children not to have to endure the violence that we had experienced. And not only that, having the added burdens from the lack of scriptural support, resources, and validation within their own faith communities. My calling propelled me on a journey beginning in my own predominantly African American community of faith and eventually expanding to include many others. As a survivor, finding my own voice meant returning to the faith community that had been my biggest source of pain and turning it not only into my greatest source of healing, but a place where others impacted by abuse could find refuge and support. I felt energized and driven to expose the handwriting on the wall and pull up the rug, exposing all the dark hidden corners, all the places where those who needed help had fled for safety, suffering in silence and shame because of the repercussions against them by their own faith communities. I wrote the following educational piece in the form of a letter to church leaders. Be aware that this may be difficult to hear for some of you, but it is necessary to open some eyes. So take care of yourself in this process. And now let's proceed. Dear church leaders, my name is Shame and Silence, and I am a member of your congregation, and sometimes I feel almost invisible. Today I came to church after being hurt sexually, physically, and emotionally by my partner, who's sitting here right next to me, wearing a big smile and saying, "Amen," every now and then. We're holding hands and appear to be the perfect couple. You don't know about the threats my partner made earlier this morning or see the blows he landed on my body when I refused to have sex with him. My 6-year-old daughter was crying so hard and yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, please don't hurt my mommy anymore." He yelled, "Shut up, you little crybaby, you're just like your stupid mother." Then he grabbed her up by her little arms and threw her into her room and slammed and locked the door behind him. I pleaded, "No, please don't hurt my baby, please." He screamed in my face, saying, "Shut up! You'd better do what I said, woman. You had better understand that you are not going anywhere until you perform your wifely duties. I'm the one in charge here, and you don't tell me what to do." Oh, my Lord, he called me every name under the sun but a child of God. Whenever anyone here asks me about my bruises, I just make up excuses by saying, "Oh, I'm so clumsy and accident prone." Or I just laugh it off and say, "I must have bumped into the door the other day." Inside, I feel so bruised, like I can never be normal. Church leaders, I've got secrets, lots of secrets. You see, there's another person sitting on the front seat participating in the service today that molested me during my childhood, from the age of 6 until I turned 15 years old. Why couldn't I make him stop? This disgusting person is my biological uncle and a church deacon. I still blame myself. Often I feel so overwhelmed, afraid, and angry. I hated myself for what was happening, but I was told by that person on the front seat things like, "It's all your fault for being so seductive." I didn't even know what that word meant at the time. He also called me a liar and told me no one would believe me anyway, even if I tried to tell anyone. He had tons of excuses telling me, "You're making too big a deal about this. It happens in all families, you know. People just don't talk about it." My so-called uncle continued to terrorize me over and over again by telling me he would make my younger brother do it if I wouldn't. He always waited to come into my room at night when everyone else was asleep, lying there frozen with fear. Knowing what was about to happen, I prayed that if he thought I was asleep, maybe, just maybe, he would go away and leave me alone. I could hear his loud breathing, smell his foul breath as he slammed himself against me. I trembled, gasping for air, wanting to just throw up, laughing while jabbing my arms until my eyes would open. He would whisper, "Wake up now and be nice to your favorite uncle." Then, tears flooding my eyes, I would feel myself losing consciousness as his hands tightened around my neck. I tried to block out the horror of it all. The person would say, "If you don't shut up right now, you stupid crybaby, I'll kill your whole family. Don't you remember, little girl? I killed your pet rabbit last week, and that was all your fault. Now just be a good girl, relax, and enjoy it. After all, I'm teaching you how to be a better woman so you'll know what it takes to plan later in life." Closing my eyes, I started praying everything would just go away. The pain cut so deep. I'm still afraid today to tell anyone. That person on the front seat robbed me not only of my childhood, but my very soul. Oh, Lord! And the pretense and silence keeps going on. Why do I have to see him at every church and family function and still feel so obligated to allow him to hug me and my daughter in front of the whole family? He makes a point of staring right at me with those piercing eyes and a smug grin whenever he is around us. I'm terrified that he will try the same thing with my daughter. So I always say, keep her close to me whenever he's around. Who do I tell? I hate to just pretend and keep pretending that everything is okay when all I want to do is cringe and get as far away from that monster as I can. It's insane. Several years ago, my little brother told me that the so-called uncle had molested him all during his childhood until he was able to get away. I was so shocked. Then it all made sense why my brother seemed okay one day, and then suddenly everything changed. He started getting smart with our parents, having fights at school, being so angry all the time, using drugs and running away from home for weeks at a time. Although he used to be so smart, now he doesn't seem to care about anything. I blame myself for not being able to protect my brother, even though he chose to blame himself and made me promise not to tell anyone. I hate my so-called uncle even more now that I know the truth. My poor brother. My brother said the other day, "Sis, the gun went off a long time ago. I'm just not dead yet." My poor brother. I don't think he'll ever be the same again, nor will I. Church leaders, I'm struggling here because it's getting harder and harder. I feel so confused. I'll never tell you about being violated because I don't know what would happen to my partner or to the child molester. Both my partner and the person on the front seat hold positions of authority here. I don't want to upset things here, even though these secrets are tearing me up inside. Before this happened, I trusted people and felt that they would do right by me. I have problems sleeping because when I sleep, bad memories rush in, causing me to keep reliving the horrors of those experiences. over and over and over again. I haven't been able to move on with my life. After attending this church for over 15 years, I never heard any of you preach a sermon or say a prayer about abuse. Once two members were whispering about some sister from another church who left town shortly after accusing her husband of abuse. I heard that several of you church leaders condone those other leaders in demanding that she leave the church and never come back. Why? The whole church leadership team went to court with her husband against her. I don't understand it. Her husband is still there, though, and everyone seems to be supportive of him. It seems as if all of the leaders agreed that she should leave and that it was, quote unquote, good riddance. And then they went on to praise the husband for such, quote unquote, good works he continues to do in the church. Sometimes I feel as if I'm suffocating, and certain things seem to make me keep remembering. I am terrified that people will look at me and know. If my church family and other members knew, they might just turn their back on me completely, or call me crazy, or tell me that I'm a big troublemaker. I don't want to lose my whole identity. I keep trying to put it all behind me. After all, it happened in the past and it's over now. I'm trying to just forgive and forget and move on. I'll never tell because who can I trust? I told my partner and he said, "You deserved it." My partner throws it up in my face constantly, and that's another reason I'll never tell. What would my family say to me? I'm too ashamed to find out. They'll probably say I brought it on myself. I'll feel too vulnerable and exposed. I can't trust anyone. I can't even trust myself. Church leaders, I want you to understand that each time I walk in the door, my heart feels so heavy, but I just can't let anyone here know what's really troubling me. Sometimes I may be sitting beside you with tears clouding my eyes. I'll just speak in generalities about needing a prayer or more strength to overcome some things in my life. I can't really tell you what's wrong, though. There's too much at stake. I don't want to lose the support of my church or immediate family. We all go to church here. The price of freeing myself from this burden would be too high. I don't want those two people to lose their jobs, church positions, or families. I don't want to see anybody get arrested. No one would believe me anyway. It's just a fact. My brother and I both know it. Can anyone really see me and understand what I'm going through? Please, somebody just help me. I'm bleeding and feeling so trapped in this double cloak, and I'm dying inside, and the trap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I am shamed by silence and silenced by shame. Take a few minutes and take a deep breath. This piece reflects the struggles of many victim survivors of violence in predominantly African American faith communities in various stages of suffering, being chained by a code of silence and dying inside in a place that should be a safe haven. Core beliefs. It is my firm belief that any community of faith that does not normalize addressing and responding to sexual and domestic violence in their midst, and let's face it, it's everywhere, then that community of faith cannot seriously be considered as a place that practices what it preaches. If they don't both talk the talk as well as walk the walk. General barriers. Within faith communities, there are many, many barriers, but we're just going to highlight a few today, and that starts with denial and minimization. Thick layers of denial and minimization get reinforced by written or unwritten, quote-unquote, house rules within church walls. For example, don't ask, don't tell. The rationale is if anything wrong is happening here, then let's just not talk about it and maybe it will just disappear. And maybe, just maybe, the problem's not that big. Boat rockin' blues. Shut up. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Churches can be so steeped in rituals and traditions that everything else gets discounted. Territorialism. This is our turf and our business. No outside system is going to come here and tell us how to run things. After all, it's worked well for us so far. We don't need to change things. Quick forgiveness. Victim blaming for not practicing quick forgiveness, not praying harder or suffering long enough and or hard enough. In Evelyn C. White's book, there's a quote that describes it perfectly. Jesus dropped the charges, so why can't you? Family preservation over safety. Armed with little or no understanding of the seriousness of violence, preserving the family may be seen as the biggest priority, and the safety of victims, unfortunately, gets discounted consciously or unconsciously. Specific barriers. There are two very important statistics that are listed here. So if African American women comprise 70% of the congregation in black churches, and we see the high proportion of women that are murdered by their partners, it's an alarming rate. And we just want to tell you that there are many barriers that exist. Some of them are distinct and others overlap for leadership, victims, and perpetrators. And that the overriding issue is the high percentage of women and children that are killed, and that we have to stop it. So under leadership, let's look at leadership. Not being responsible and accountable to the flock, not wanting to appear as needing help to tackle the issues, or copying an attitude. Lack of knowledge and understanding of the impact and consequences. Feeling that they are the absolute authority and have the final word on things. And mixed in is internalized oppression and sexism, and that applies to leadership, victims, and perpetrators. So let's go back to victims again. They may have cultural or historical as well as spiritual beliefs that reinforce staying in the relationship, no matter how bad it gets, such as a strong personal identification based on interfamily structure, hierarchy, patriarchal elements, and cultural identity, and may define themselves accordingly as a wife, woman, mother, and homemaker. We're talking about sex role stereotyping that occurs. Perpetrators. They have many cultural and historical as well as spiritual beliefs that reinforce beliefs that he has a right to keep his partner in check, and strong indications from the faith community that increases the woman and children's victimization and legitimizes the abuser's behavior. He's the head, big boss, and the church may be seen by perpetrators and leadership as well as victims that this is the only place where the black man can still rule the roost. impact of not addressing the problem? Everyone is held hostage by the lack of effective responses from the top down. That means the leadership. Church leadership are the key accountants in this setting and are held to a higher standard of accountability and responsibility. And as such, they need to name it and claim it in order to unchain it. That means break the silence and recognize that domestic and sexual violence victim survivors and impacted others are in their midst, and unchain everyone from being held hostage by taking steps to end it in a way that never, ever puts victims at further risk of danger. Multi-communities team response model. I worked very closely with the Art Institute of Seattle, and they developed my design for my response model. Just wanted to give them credit for that. And the organization that I founded, Multi-Communities, works to address, prevent, and reverse domestic, youth, and sexual violence, as well as chemical dependency in predominantly African American faith communities, utilizing a wraparound team approach comprised of, and we also use helpers in this process, helpers, keepers, seekers, and watchers as well within each church setting. We shine a light on leadership to be at ease in addressing domestic and sexual violence issues. Ease is defined as effective, aware, sensitive, and educated. Victim survivors are our first priority, and they will have a choice of multiple means of access to receive the help and support services that they need in a safe, confidential manner. In conclusion, live daily with hope. If you don't find a door of opportunity to tackle the problem, then create a window and climb through. Recognize that you're dealing with a complicated problem in breaking the silence, and there is more than one road to solutions. Don't forget to claim and celebrate and reach out and find allies. That includes men and women who are equipped to serve. That means they're willing, able, and ready to serve alongside of you. And don't forget to honor them. There have been many people who have helped me along my 30-year journey, and at the forefront were two very strong African American male colleagues who were community leaders, and they are still with me today. Even in 2016, we know we still have a long way to go. The issues of domestic and sexual violence and the shame and silence still remain. However, my work and the work of others goes forward in spite of not being very celebrated or applauded within our own faith communities. I remain, however, clear that I am called to serve, and that my love sentence will last a lifetime, and my commitment and strength deepens daily with love. And I and others like me will not quit until we can break that shame and silence so that it is addressed daily within our church settings. That is our greatest hope. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart today, and every day as always. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Betty. So we have a couple of questions. First, I want to tell everyone that we do have a list of resources that Betty has put together here. So when you receive today's PDF document with these resources, you'll be able to kind of explore them a little bit further. So Betty, one question we have is about your wraparound response service. And
Yes.
can you kind of define what these three levels of people are?
Oh, sure, I will. So the keepers, that would be the leadership mainly. They are the keepers of the flock. And so, as I have said throughout the presentation, that they are the key accountants. So we want the keepers to be armed in that EASE model: effective, aware, sensitive, and educated. And that the roles need to also be clearly defined. We won't have everyone doing the same thing in this team response model, that there are different people serving in different ways within this response model. So the helpers or the peer helpers. So that might be that a victim survivor decides to go to someone in their peer group who is a helper. And that helper can then provide them with resources, including those of us who are skilled in advocacy, to actually provide that layer of support. But the peer helper can also provide another level of support that we cannot. But we want to work in cooperation with each other. So those roles would be clearly defined. The helper would mainly be the peer helpers. I hope that explains that part of it. And the seekers, of course, would be the people who are needing help, the victim survivors, impacted others, and perpetrators of violence. When we work with perpetrators of violence as well in accessing resources and helping them to change their behavior, only when it, never ever puts a victim at risk of further danger. Does that explain it pretty
Yeah.
well?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That's great. So audience members, you can send in your questions anytime. So we have one question. What's the first step to get started in my faith community?
The first step to get started in your faith community, that sounds like a simple question, but it can be very complicated. But I would say the first step to take is to approach a leader about doing perhaps a sermon topic on the issue. And it depends also if you have been trained in advocacy and are you in the field of advocacy already, or would you need to access some support services? I would say if you need to access support services, I would call an advocate at a shelter or transitional housing program or a community program that's in the domestic or sexual violence field, and explain to them also what you're trying to do and offer to work alongside of them. But I would first approach a leader within my own faith community and make a sermon request and say that you will help them with that and provide them with some support and resources. And also, that in that way you could team with an advocate and get the door open a crack. And then if like I was saying about being creative and in getting the door open, or designing a window. I'm rambling on, but do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's great. Because I think one of the things that you've done so brilliantly in your career is act as a bridge between faith communities and secular organizations that are set up to help victims. And that's not always a very strong bridge. So I think that's one of the things that you really are wonderful about being able to do. We have another.
And
Sorry.
I just wanted to say a little bit more on that question, and that is that you could organize an event, an awareness event, you know, say a teen dating violence awareness event, or candlelight vigil, or, oh, there's numerous events that you could organize around bringing greater awareness to your faith community, and that might be a way to open the door as well, just to get started. And invite a speaker from a shelter, a transitional program, or a community program, or sexual assault program, et cetera, et cetera. I hope that that explains it further.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
And, you know, a lot of those people are in our congregations, so you might have great resources sitting in the pews.
And that's a plus.
Yeah. So I have
Mhm.
another question for you. Does your advocacy include the spiritual element?
Yes, it does. Always, always, always. One example of that would be that I might sit with a faith leader, and the faith leader would provide some scriptural resources. I would back that up with further scriptural resources, as well as do the advocacy piece, which would include safety planning, information, to bring greater awareness to the victim in terms of the level of violence that she has been experiencing, and resources, sometimes just to make a shelter referral for that victim, and walk her through that process as well. I hope that makes sense.
Yes,
I
that
could
makes
go
sense.
on and on and on.
So
Hmm.
you mentioned that you work with two men of faith in your work.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and I guess the question, I'm trying to interpret this question, it seems like,
Hmm.
does the message coming from a man have a
Hmm.
different impact?
Oh, definitely. Like I say, these guys have been with me for almost the whole 30 years, and they're strong, strong and visible in the community. They work. One of them has a whole bunch of expertise in youth violence, and has worked with youth in the juvenile justice system for 28 years he worked, and so they bring that different perspective. They also help me in that people can see by me teaming with the guys. I call them my guys. uh, they then know it's not just a women's issue. You know, Betty's talking about this topic, but here's some men who treat it just as seriously. And so it really helps. We've teamed together for things like uh, teen dating violence and sexual assault awareness events. We have teamed together to work individually with people who with families that have wanted to have an understanding of the impact of violence, all different kinds of situations. But they've also done presentations with me at colleges and universities. And again, they bring a different perspective to things, but they do take the issues very, very seriously and have a great understanding. And the other uh, male colleague has a global perspective on violence. He has a tremendous and a lot of expertise about the global perspective. And that lends a whole different um, piece as well that's really, really needed for everyone to understand that it's not just a local issue within a church, it's a global issue for all of us. It's an issue for women and children everywhere.
Okay, so we have a question here about how do you make the alliances with the leaders in the faith community? How do you reach out to them and get them to listen?
Well, in the past, I've done leadership trainings for several sister congregations, and any congregations, Greater Seattle area-wide and beyond, that were interested. We've had I also had a region-wide workshop for leaders from in Oregon, California, and locally in Washington. And that was an awareness, a time to bring greater awareness and also to build an alliance with leaders from a wider span of areas. But I also take a one-on-one approach. I think it differs with each church as to what they and their leadership as to how you approach them. And knowing how and when has been on my heart. And sometimes what I'm saying is you just have to take the risk and step out on faith and do it. And if you're passionate about it, it's going to happen. There's no ideal way to do it. But I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to start in my own faith community to build those alliances and approach preachers about these very important issues. And so do it as you, whatever you feel on your heart to do. Go ahead and do it. Just take a chance. It's worth it to step out and take that risk. A lot of people can be helped as a result.
Yeah, I know that Marie Fortune, our founder, often says that, preachers will say, well, this isn't a problem in our congregation because no one ever tells me about it. And,
Yes.
as your reading pointed out, people don't step forward when they don't think it's safe. And once preachers start addressing the issue, then people know that they have somewhere to turn. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Very definitely. And, of course, I operate from the premise that it's already here, brother. It's already here. Whether it's been, spoken or unspoken, it's already here, and we've got to do something to change it. So, because there's the high proportion of women that are being murdered by their partners is shocking. It's, what is it, 35% higher for African American women than women in other races? This has got to stop.
I know that you do a lot of work with youth, and I know that you're also working towards an elder-youth sort of collaboration.
Yes.
Do you want to say?
I am, definitely. Well, what I want to say is that it takes all of us of every age and every generation. Even within just looking within the church setting, there's several generations there. It needs to be addressed, from child abuse all the way to the elder, the most senior elder in the congregation, because it doesn't just impact if there's child abuse going on, if there's animal abuse going on. It just doesn't, it's not in a vacuum. It's not isolated. There's other stuff going on within that family. And even, the letter that I read about my name is shame and silence, even within that, there are multiple things going on. There are multiple things that need to be addressed. So I think that we just need to team together as generations and address this issue because it impacts all of us. Yeah. And that's why we're doing a project around that.
Great. Thank you. I'm trying to read this question here. This will just take me a second. So can you give an example of a situation where you've actually seen a church turn around and kind of embrace the issue and embrace victims and a change in the culture of a faith community?
Okay, I just want to use my little definition. It's like backpedaling in quicksand, so to speak. No, I have never in my 30 years seen a church that addresses, not within the predominantly African American faith community, seen a church that really gets it and actively works toward addressing it at all levels. And that is very unfortunate and heartbreaking to say, but I have to tell you the truth. Hello?
Hey, yes,
Mm-hmm.
it is heartbreaking, especially given all the work. um,
Yes.
do you find that victims within faith communities are accessing resources that aren't necessarily within the faith communities? Do you feel like,
Well, it's a double-edged sword, I believe, for victims, because tapping, I will say it's unequal access to resources. Number one, so the victim survivor may have the dilemma of not wanting to let an outside system know about her business. I know the struggles that I had in tapping into outside resources. I thought it was like going into the pits of hell. I don't think that that has changed in 2016. We would like to say we're more productive and enlightened and aware, but I think that there are many victims who are struggling with the dilemma of maybe, just maybe, I can't do anything. I have to endure this and stay in there and try harder and pray longer and get the quick forgiveness and practice that, and because it's a virtue to stay and endure suffering and pain. I think that there is a mindset um, that if they're not helping me here at this church, at this congregation, then maybe what I'm saying isn't valid. Maybe what I'm feeling or going through is not valid enough or important enough for me to access an outside system. And I'm not saying that that occurs for all victim survivors, but unfortunately, I still feel that it is still occurring for many. And the only way to open that up is, like I said, to normalize addressing the issue within your own faith community. And that would also include, the visibility for victim survivors. What I mean by visibility is when you walk into the church, years and years and years ago, when I walked into a church, I did not see literature. I did not see posters. I did not see talk. I did not hear any or see any indicators that it would be okay to disclose. And I'm saying that the resources that are within the congregation should include visibility for victims to see other resources and recognize that it's okay to tap into those, but also to see backup from leadership, clear policies, clear protocols that say we don't tolerate abuse. We will not accept this in any way, shape, or form. And, information about how to tap into resources. And you know what? I talked so long, I forgot the question. Sorry, but
no, that was perfect. Talking about visibility and connecting survivors with resources outside the community if they're not receiving help inside the community. So that was great. We're getting close to the end here, and I just want to point out to folks that we have a list of upcoming webinars that I think will be really interesting. And one that is somewhat related to this is on May 25th. Reverend Dr. Sharon Ellis Davis is going to be speaking about Black women violence and the abuse to prison pipeline. Because Betty, I know you and I were talking about the issue of the threat of incarcerating a Black man for domestic violence is something that many women will hesitate to go to the police.
yes. And, there's a bit of a quote by Linda Marie Jordan in her book, Domestic Violence in the African American Community, The Role of the Black Church. Of all people imprisoned in the United States, most 54% are African American. Young African American males between the ages of 18 and 24 years make up the largest population group in American jails. Currently, more African Americans are in prison than are in college.
Yeah.
The woman's awareness of the systematic oppression of African American men through lynching, imprisonment, unemployment, and the sexual politics of sexual violence has outfitted women to be understanding and tolerant of words and actions that hurt them. So it's a very complicated issue in terms of victims accessing resources, in terms of the impact of our men being in the prison system. Powerful.
Yeah,
Big barriers.
absolutely. So, Betty, we're getting toward the end of time. I wonder if you have any last-minute words that you'd like to leave us with?
Last minute words would be keep on keeping on, that this is an issue that that we're not going to go away until the issue is solved. And that, live, like I said, live with hope. We can do it. We can do it.
Thank you so much, Betty. I want to thank you for sharing your words of wisdom with us and your experience. And I want to invite all of you to attend our future webinars. So as you close the webinar window today, you'll be prompted to fill out a short survey, and we would love to have your feedback. Grateful for any advice or inspiration about future webinars. And you can view all of our upcoming webinars on our website at faithtrustinstitute.org. This concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.